Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Welcome. Thanks for joining me. Glad to see you. Glad you could be here. So, just me and Shirley. Shirley's channel chatter. So I have 3 channels here on YouTube. So just trying to create the best content that I can. So subscribe below, comment below, and just want to bring you today a few more philosophers, from our past. So hope you all having a blessed day so far. So I am Shirley from Just Being Shirley, Everything Shirley, and Shirley's channel chatter. 3 channels here on YouTube. I just started, and I am going to be creating the best content that I can. So if you have any ideas for me, anything that you might want me to talk about that's related to business, I don't mind doing research. So I'm dealing with mostly things relating to marketing, advertising, promoting, trademarks, copyrights, patents. I want to talk about different philosophers from our history, because I studied a lot of them down at Strayer University, my time down there, and I found a lot of them very interesting, and a lot of their views and their quotes are right online, and they're being used today. Socrates, Plato, we have a whole lot of them, John Locke, B.F. Skinner. It's so many, it's going to probably take me the whole year to get through all of them, but that's cool because I'm trying to build my content, and I'm trying to, I will be bringing you plenty of information regarding a lot of these philosophers, and just, mostly business related, accounting, a little bit of law, because I do have a couple of law classes that I did take Strayer University. But let me get started. So the first one I want to talk about today is Ludwig van Beethoven. So I'll just be reading as I go along with the computer, but I do have the names here. So Ludwig van Beethoven, known throughout the world for the hymn to joy of his 9th symphony, is one of the greatest composers in music history. So imagine being one of the greatest composer in music history. I know we have a lot of music, things going on today. We have rap music, we have R&B, we have hip hop, but just want to take you back a little bit to so many people that started, in the music industry. So Ludwig van Beethoven, one of the greatest composers in musical history, despite spending his early years in poverty and pain with a drunkard. He had a drunkard for a father. Beethoven received a solid musical education, particularly in Vienna with Haydn and Salieri. So in other words, just because his father was a drunk, but that doesn't mean, it's just like today, we might look at our parents to see if they had, they may have had certain faults, but it goes to show you that just because another person, even if it's a relative, mother, father, even if they had their faults, doesn't mean that you have to walk in their shoes. So it doesn't mean that you have to walk in their shoes. So I know my parents, and even one of them didn't have a college education, but I went on and got my degree, Strayer University. So I did the bachelor's and the master's. I did the bachelor's in business administration and the master's in information systems, right here in the DMV, Strayer University. So we don't have to really follow in the footsteps of our parents or our cousins, sisters and brothers. So do what you want to do. So they're saying his father was a drunk, but he went on to be, and his early years he lived in poverty, but his early years he was impoverished. So it says, let me see what else I have on Beethoven. So in his early years, he lived in poverty. Let me show you what he looked like. Ludwig van Beethoven. Before I continue on, just want to show you what he looked like. Beethoven, Ludwig van Beethoven. So, see what else I can find on Beethoven. So Ludwig van Beethoven. So they do have some videos here, but I'm not going to, you know, play none of the videos. But so I like to see, you know, what college did he go to, and maybe some of his quotes. Okay, Ludwig Beethoven, Ludwig van Beethoven. He was baptized December 17, 1770, to March the 26th, 1827. He was a German composer and pianist. Beethoven remains one of the most admired composers in the history of Western music. His works rank amongst the most performed of the classical music repertoire and span, let me click on more. So Beethoven remains one of the admired composers in the history of Western music. His works rank amongst the most performed of the classical music repertoire and span the transition from the classical period to the Romantic era in classical music. His career has conventionally been divided into early, middle, and late periods. His early period, during which he forged his craft, is typically considered to have lasted until 1802. From 1802 to around 1812, his middle period showed an individual development from the styles of Joseph Haydn and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So Mozart was a pretty good composer as well, and is sometimes characterized as heroic. During this time, he began to grow increasingly deaf in his late period from 1812 to 1827. So this is Beethoven. So later on, so in other words, his father was a drunk, but he still went on to become one of the best composers in the history of Western music. And then as he got older, he started, you know, losing his hearing. And it says his early period during which he forged his craft is typically considered to have lasted until 1802. But it said during this time he began to grow increasingly deaf in his late period from 1812 to 1827. He extended his innovations in musical form and expression. So Beethoven, I think it's very important to talk about a lot of these gentlemen because, in my opinion, they paved the way for a lot of artists and musicians today. So then it says, Beethoven was born in Bonn. His musical talent was obviously at an early age. So he had that musical talent at an early age, and he didn't let his father, you know, his father was a drunk, but he didn't let that stop him. So he had the talent, so he went on and, you know, and moved forward in his life. He knew what he wanted to do, so he moved forward. At age 21, Beethoven moved to Vienna, Virginia. So we still have Vienna, Virginia here today. Alexandria, Virginia, Vienna, Virginia, different parts of Virginia. At age 21, he moved to Vienna, which subsequently became his base, and studied composition with Haydn. Beethoven then gained a reputation as a virtuoso pianist, and he was soon patronized by Karl Alois, Prince Lichnowsky, for compositions, which resulted in his 3 opus 1 piano trios, the earliest works to which he accorded an opus number in 1795. So many years ago. His first major orchestral work, the First Symphony, premiered in 1800, and his first set of string quartets was published in 1801. Despite his hearing deteriorating during his period, he continued to conduct, premiering his Third and Fifth Symphonies. So he had a Third and Fifth Symphony, he had a First Symphony, Third and Fifth Symphony. His violin concerto appeared in 1806, his last piano concerto, number 5, OP 73, known as the Emperor, dedicated to his frequent patron, Archduke Rudolph of Austria, was premiered in 1811. Without Beethoven as soloist, he was also completely deaf by 1814. Just imagine that, and still being able to do what you love to do. So that also reminds me of Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder still had that talent, and it still kept on going and moving forward. Didn't let that disability, stop them from, doing what they love to do, which was, music. Beethoven, it says, Beethoven was a soloist. So, in other words, he did things by himself. He was a soloist. And he was almost completely deaf by 1814, and he then gave up performing and appearing in public. So I guess later on, as his disability began to get the best of him, so he stopped performing in public. He described his problems with health and his unfulfilled personal life in 2 letters. So his Haley Genstadt Testament, 1802, to his brothers, and his unsent love letter to an unknown immortal beloved, 1812. After 1810, increasingly less socially involved, Beethoven composed many of his most admired works, including later symphonies, mature chamber music, and the late piano sonatas. His only opera, Fidelio, first performed in 1805, so many years ago, but I still find Beethoven, Mozart, I still find them very fascinating. The things they went through in life, and it didn't stop them. They just kept on going. And we have a lot of individuals today in our generation that, they do the same thing. They don't let that stop them. They don't let all the negative comments, that people may have about them, they don't let that stop them. They just keep on moving on. I mean, if you have a talent, keep it going. It says in his only opera, so he had concertos, he had some operas that he performed, his symphonies, and as he got a little older, and I guess after his disability began to take over him, he stopped performing in public. And it's his only opera, Fidelio, first performed in 1805, was revised to its final version in 1814. He composed Mr. Solemnis between 1819 and 1823 in his final symphony, number 9, his final symphony number 9, one of the first examples of a choral symphony between 1822 and 1824. Written in his last years, his late string quartets, including the Grosse Fuge, 1825 to 1826, are among his final achievements. After some months of bedridden illness, he died in 1827. Beethoven's works remain mainstays of the classical music repertoire. So you probably can still look his information up online, because I write online here on Google. And so Beethoven is one of the greatest in our past. Beethoven was the grandson of Ludwig Beethoven was the grandson of Ludwig van Beethoven. So he must have had the same name as his grandfather, because it said Beethoven was the grandson of Ludwig van Beethoven, a musician from the town of Mechelen in the Austrian Duchy of Brandenburg. So I'm not going to read all this. But it said Ludwig was employed as a bass singer at the court of. This must be his grandson. They said Beethoven was the grandson of Ludwig van Beethoven. So they had the same name. Beethoven. It said Ludwig was employed as a bass singer. Okay, so this must be. Okay, this is going into family and early life. So he must have been a grandson. So he must have had the same name as his grandfather. So let's move on. That's Beethoven. Let's talk about Mozart. Let's see what we're gonna find out about Mozart. So Beethoven, I checked that off. He was a pianist. So we have Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He was born January 27, 1756 in Salzburg, Archbishopric of Salzburg, Austria. Died December 5th, 1791 in Vienna. He was an Austrian composer, widely recognized as one of the greatest composers in the history of Western music. With Haydn and Beethoven, he brought to its height the achievement of the Viennese classical school. Unlike any other composer in musical history, he wrote in all the musical genres. He wrote in all musical genres. He wrote in all musical genres of his day and excelled in every one. His taste, his command of form, and his range of expression have made him seem the most universal of all composers. Yet it may also be said that his music was written to accommodate the specific tastes of particular audiences. Of course, nowadays our musicians nowadays, I guess I would say, of course they are going to try to, gear to a certain target market when it comes to their music. In other words, we have rap music now, and we have R&B. We still have classical, gospel, but you never know who wants to listen to your music. You might have a concert, you rapping, you got a rap concert. You never know who could show up. I might show up at a rap concert. But so my son, he raps too, so I love rap music. I love R&B. I love country. I love all types of music. So I'm very, it's very interesting and enlightening and inspirational to look back on the musicians of our past. It's very inspirational to me. I like to learn. I am a person that loves to learn about everything. My husband used to always say, honey, you just got too many things on your plate. You're just trying to do so much. Mozart most commonly called himself Wolfgang Amadeus or Wolfgang Gottlieb. His father, Leopold, came from a family of good standing from which he was estranged, which included architects and bookbinders. Leopold was the author of a famous violin playing manual, which was published in the very year of Mozart's birth. His mother, Anna Maria Perto, was born of a middle-class family active in local administration. Mozart and his sister, Maria Anna, were the only two of their 7 children to survive. So Mozart was, him and his sister was the only 2 of 7 to survive. So that means 5 of his siblings, were out of his life, went out of his life. The boy's early talent for music was remarkable. So Mozart had an early talent for music. At 3, he was picking out chords and harpsichord. Imagine that. Imagine that at 3 years old, you picking out chords on the harpsichord. I know my husband was a guitar player, a very good guitar player, and he was trying to show me a few little chords, and I still have the guitars around here. But he was trying to show me some chords on the guitar, but I just couldn't get it. I guess practice makes perfect, but I'm going to get into, I'm going to get into the guitar, and I am very excited about learning. When it says at 3 years old, Mozart, that's why I say he was a musical genius. Imagine at 3 years old, I know my granddaughter is 4, and I know daggone well she would not be picking out no chords. But it says at 3, and she's 4, he's 3, he was picking out chords on the harpsichord. At 4, he was playing short pieces, and at 5, he was composing. Just think, that is Mozart. At 5, he was composing. That's why they said he was a musical genius. Mozart. In other words, at 3, he was picking out chords. At 4, playing short pieces. And 5, by 5, he was composing. There are anecdotes about his precise memory of pitch, about his scribbling a concerto at the age of 5, and about his gentleness and sensitivity. He was afraid of the trumpet. Just before he was 6, his father took him to Nana 1, also highly talented, to Munich to play at the Bavarian court. And a few months later, they went to Vienna and were heard at the imperial court and in noble houses. The miracle which God led be born in Salzburg was Leopold's description of his son, and he was keenly conscious of his duty to God as he saw it, to draw the miracle to the notice of the world, and incidentally to profit from doing so. In mid-1763, he obtained a leave of absence from his position as deputy Kapellmeister at the Prince Archbishop's Court of Salzburg, and the family set out on a prolonged tour. They went to what were all the main musical centers of Western Europe. So I'm not going to read all this. Let me see what else they have about Mozart. Okay, after a little more than 9 months, in Salzburg, the Mozart set out for Vienna in September 1767. Where, apart from a 10-week break during the smallpox epidemic, they spent 15 months. Mozart wrote one-act German singspiel, Bastien en Bastien, which was given privately. Greater hopes were attached to his prospect of having an Italian opera buffa, La Finta Simplice, done at the Court Theater, hopes that were, however, frustrated, much to Leopold's indignation. Still only 13, Mozart had by now acquired considerably fluency in the musical language of his time, and he was especially adept at imitating the musical equivalent of local dialects. The early Paris and London sonatas, the autographs of which include Leopold's helping hand, show a childlike pleasure in patterns of notes and textures. So I'm not going to read too much more. That's Mozart, so let's know that he was a musical genius by age 5. So he was picking out chords, and he was just starting early. So it says the Italian tours of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So he did a lot. So I'm not going to read a whole lot or a whole lot more about Mozart, but you can also read up on Mozart. You can read up more on Mozart. So he most commonly called himself Wolfgang Amadeus or Wolfgang Gottlieb. So his father, Leopold, his father was named Leopold, came from a family of good standing. And it says his father was the author of a famous violin playing manual, which was published in the very year of Mozart's birth. So his father was an author, and they called him Leopold. That's his father. And his father was, he published a violin playing manual, which was published the same year Mozart was born. So Mozart, he was it's just, the musical genius. So let's see. Let me go to B.F. Skinner. Let me go to B.F. Skinner. Just, giving you a few little information, giving you a little bit of information on certain ones that I found interesting and enlightening and inspirational. So B.F. Skinner is another one. I wanted to talk about. I think B.F. Skinner. I think I talked about John Locke before, but I can always talk a little bit more about Locke and his. I think I talked about John Locke yesterday on my video. So let me go to B.F. Skinner. So these are some of the people that I learned about in my classes. Some of my classes down straight at university. So B.F. Skinner. So his name was Burris Frederick Skinner. He was a male that helped people, and Freud was his competition. Sigmund Freud. So I probably talk about him too. March the 20th, 1904 to August 18, 1990. So that's when he passed away, August 18th, 1990. He was an American psychologist, behaviorist. So B.F. Skinner was an American psychologist and a behaviorist, author, inventor, and social philosopher. All these philosophers that I'm going to have a whole list. When I finish, I want to make sure I have all of them listed. So I'll do a final recap when I finish. It's probably going to take me I don't know if it's going to take me the whole year, but it's going to take me some time. But I want to do my research on many as I can. He was a professor of psychology at Harvard University from 1958 until his retirement. So this is B.F. Skinner. So so he was an American psychologist, behaviorist, author, inventor. Imagine being all of that. Psychologist, behaviorist, author, inventor. He went to Harvard University. Considering free will to be an illusion, Skinner saw human action as dependent on consequences of previous actions, a theory he would articulate as a principle of reinforcement. So he saw human action as dependent on consequences. So in other words, your actions definitely will bring about certain consequences. So what you do, you definitely have to watch out and be mindful. Be mindful of the things that you do, because it's definitely going to have some consequences. You can't go down the street and just, hollering and screaming, and they're going to think you crazy. Somebody going to call the police on you. They might commit you to a crazy house, or or you can't just go down the street and hit somebody, and then there's just, that's an assault right there. Can't put nobody in fear, so that so I know if you hit somebody, that would be the battery, but if you put them in fear and apprehension, that is the assault. So B.F. Skinner is saying that human action, he saw human action as dependent on consequences of previous actions. So in other words, if you if you do something that you're not supposed to do, or it don't have to be nothing negative, it could be something positive. So what he's saying is, I guess that there's always consequences relating to your actions. If the consequences to an action, as I said, are bad, there is a high chance the action will not be repeated. In other words, if you hit somebody and the consequences is bad, well, sometimes consequences are bad. In other words, you hit somebody and your consequences are bad. What is the likelihood that you would do that? You would repeat it, Well, some people repeat it because some people, some people have been to jail time and time. They do, they commit a bad, they do something that's not right. The action was bad. And what if they did something, they did an action and it was bad and they end up going to jail? What are the chances that when they come out that they won't repeat that bad action? But it has happened, and it happens a lot too. Say if the consequences to action are bad, there is a high chance the action will not be repeated. There's a high chance. If the consequences are good, the probability of the action being repeated becomes stronger. So in other words, if the consequences are good, the probability of the action being repeated becomes stronger. That's true. That sounds good. But that's not always the case, but he had his theory. That's his theory. B.F. Skinner. So Skinner developed behavior analysis, especially the philosophy of radical behaviorism, and founded the experimental analysis of behavior, a school of experimental research psychology. He also used operant conditioning to strengthen behavior, considering the rate of response to be the most effective measure of response strength. To study operant conditioning, he invented the operant conditioning chamber, aka the Skinner box. So he created something called the Skinner box. And to measure the rate, he invented a cumulative recorder. Using these tools, he and Charles Foerster produced Skinner's most influential experimental work, outlined in their 1957 book, Schedules of Reinforcement. Skinner was a prolific author, publishing 21 books and 180 articles. So just imagine 21 books and 180 articles. He imagined the application of his ideas to the design of a human community in his 1948 utopian novel, Walden 2. While his analysis of human behavior culminated in his 1958 work, Verbal Behavior. Skinner, John B. Watson, and Ivan Pavlov. Okay, I learned about Ivan Pavlov too. Let me put his name down. Ivan Pavlov. So Skinner, John B. Watson, Ivan Pavlov are considered to be the pioneers of modern behaviorism. Modern behaviorism. Modern behaviorism culminated in his 1958 work on verbal behavior. Skinner is the most influential psychologist of the 20th century. Skinner was born in Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, to Grace and William Skinner, the latter of whom was a lawyer. So one of his parents was a lawyer. Skinner became an atheist after a Christian teacher tried to assuage his fear of the hell that his grandmother described. His brother Edward, 2.5 years younger, was gone at the age of 16. Okay. Skinner's closest friend as a young boy was Raphael Miller, whom he called Doc because his father was a doctor. Doc and Skinner became friends due to their parents' religiousness, and both had an interest in contraptions and gadgets. So he met a friend, he had a friend, and they both were interested in these gadgets. They had set up a telegraph line between their houses to send messages to each other, although they had to call each other on the telephone due to the confusing messages sent back and forth. During the summer, Doc and Skinner started an elderberry business to gather berries and sell them door to door. They found that when they picked the ripe berries, the unripe ones came off the branches too, so they built a device that was able to separate them. The device was a the device was a bent piece of metal to form a trough. They would pour water down the trough into the bucket. So they poured water down the trough into the bucket. So I guess it came down like that, went into the bucket. And the ripe berries would sink into the bucket, and the unripe ones would be pushed over the edge to be thrown away. So it says Skinner, he went to Hamilton College in New York with the intention of becoming a writer. He found himself at a social disadvantage at the college because of his intellectual attitude. So I guess he had a different way of thinking, and he found himself like sort of like an outcast. I mean, I know when I first started college, I kind of felt like an outcast. Sometimes, you know, you get a little kickback sometimes from your classmates, but no, don't never let nothing stop you, because if I would have let that stop me, I would have never finished. So, you know, I had a lot of kickback because I was kind of shy. And we had, you know, I know sometimes we had to do presentations in front of the class, and I was one that was kind of scared to do that, but in order to pass, I had to do what I could. I had to do my research, I had to get up there in front of the class, and even in my law class, I had to, the teacher gave us an assignment. We went home. You know, you read your chapters. The teacher may say read chapter 3 to 6 or whatever chapters, were required of us to read. And then, when you come to class, you're going to have to get up there and explain. Put us in, sometimes the teacher would put us in groups. And we would have to get up there, each one in the group would have to get up there and have a little bit of information to explain. So that had to be done. So it says, when he attended college with the intention of becoming a writer, he found himself at a social disadvantage. So a lot of us, started out with a social disadvantage, but sometimes you had to kind of push forward and keep on moving. It says he wrote for a school paper, but as an atheist, he was critical of the traditional morals of his college. After receiving his Bachelor's of Arts in English Literature, he attended Harvard University, where he would later research and teach. So later on, B.F. Skinner, he obtained his bachelor's degree, began to teach. I guess it said he attended Harvard. He later taught at Harvard University, where he received his bachelor's degree. While attending Harvard, a fellow student, Fred S. Keller, convinced Skinner that he could make an experimental science the study of behavior. So he was dealing in behavior, the study of human behavior. This led Skinner to invent a prototype for the Skinner box and to join Keller in the creation of other tools for small experiments. After graduation, Skinner unsuccessfully tried to write a novel while he lived with his parents, a period that he later called the Dark Years. So he tried to write a novel, that didn't work, but he had a lot of accomplishments in his day. He became disillusioned with his literary skills despite encouragement from the renowned poet Robert Frost. So that's a name, different names they give me here. Concluding that he had little world experience and no strong personal perspective from which to write. His encounter with John B. Watson's behaviorism led him into graduate school in psychology and to the development of his own version of behaviorism. So Skinner also received his PhD from Harvard in 1931 and remained there as a researcher for some years. In 1936, he went to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis to teach. In 1945, he moved to Indiana University, where he was chair of the psychology department from 1946 to 1947, before returning to Harvard as a tenured professor in 1948. He remained at Harvard for the rest of his life. In 1973, Skinner was one of the signers of the Humanist Manifesto. So, and also this is all I'm gonna say about him. But it also says he was married. His wife was named Yvonne E. Blue, and they had two children, Julie and Deborah. So that is B.F. Skinner. So B.F. Skinner, let me show you what he looked like. Show you what B.F. Skinner looked like. So B.F. Skinner, that's B.F. Skinner. So B.F. Skinner. So let me go on to the next gentleman that I want to talk about. So B.F. Skinner. So that is B.F. Skinner. So B.F. Skinner, so in other words, he was an American psychologist, and he saw human action as dependent on consequences. So I'm going to go on to the next one. So in theory, he would articulate as a principle of reinforcement. In other words, he's talking about human behavior, basically. B.F. Skinner, human behavior. So in other words, if you create an action, or you acting on something in a certain way, so he's talking about the reinforcement. In other words, you're acting on something in a certain way. In other words, you hit somebody, like I said previously, but you end up, that's a battery. But you hit somebody, which is a battery. What if you end up in jail from behind doing something like that? So what are the chances that, what if nothing happens to you? So in other words, he felt that consequences had a lot to do with you, whether or not you would repeat that action again or not. So whether or not you would repeat that action. In other words, that action, you hit somebody, and that's a battery, you end up in jail, or you end up with consequences end up being bad for you. What are the chances of you repeating that action? 9 times out of 10. Well, some people have repeated the action. Some people, so it says Skinner he saw human action as dependent on consequences. So he saw human action as dependent on consequences. So sometimes people can do something and there are no consequences, and they keep on doing it. So in theory, he would articulate it as a principle of reinforcement. So if the consequences to an action are bad, there is a high chance the action will not be repeated. So that's B.F. Skinner. So let me go on. Let me talk a little bit more about Freud. And, let me see. Let me see if B.F. Skinner got any quotes before I go on. Let me see if B.F. Skinner have any quotes. So B.F. Skinner, let me see if B.F. Skinner have any quotes. B.F. Skinner, before I move on. I want to move on to Sigmund Freud. But let's see if B.F. Skinner have a couple of quotes. Okay, B.F. Skinner quotes: "Education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten. We shouldn't teach great books. We should teach a love of reading. The real problem is not whether machines think, but whether men do. The consequences of an act affect the probability of its occurring again." Yep. So that is his quote. So that is Skinner. The consequences of an act affect the probability of its occurring again. So in other words, they're right, because that is something definitely to think about. Well, that is something that definitely should be happening. So he was an American behaviorist, B.F. Skinner. American behaviorist. I love going back in time, you know, and looking up these different people. It could be male, it could be female. So education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten. So if you learn, so in other words, education will survive even if what you have learned has been forgotten. But I like this one. The consequences of an act affect the probability of its occurring again. So things that we do definitely have to have consequences. So that's why a lot of times you know, when it comes to voting for president or what you call governor, presidents, mayor, a lot of times we look and see the things that they are most likely to change once they get in office. So if they are, I mean, you know, you look at their history. So some of them have been prosecutors in the past. Some of them had other jobs, you know. Some of them, you know, did this and did that. But we want to look at the things that they, you know, might do when they get in office. Are they going to change the laws? You know, a law that we might be hoping for them to change. You know, so in other words, B.F. Skinner saying that behavior, you know, should definitely be based on consequences. So are they going to change some of the laws? You know, like, you know, we're trying to get some of these, you know, these laws that hurt people. You know, laws that the laws don't hurt. Well, the laws do hurt. Laws could hurt people, but you know, the actions of people sometimes hurt other people. So, you know, we want to see consequences come out of these bad actions. So it says B.F. Skinner. Let me check out some more quotes. So in other words, the consequences of an act affect the probability of its occurring again. So let me see. So that is a good quote. B.F. Skinner. A person who has been punished is not thereby simply less inclined to behave in a given way. At best, he learns how to avoid punishment. In other words, yes, so this is a good one too. B.F. Skinner, a person who has been punished is not thereby simply less inclined to behave in a given way. At best, he learns how to avoid punishment. So in other words, if he did something the first time and he was punished, and then he is going to be a little careful, he's going to be a little more careful the next time, probably not to get caught, first of all, and then he learns how to avoid punishment because he learned how not to get caught. See, a person who has been punished is not thereby simply less inclined to behave in a given way. At best, he learns how to avoid punishment. So a person who has been punished is not thereby simply less inclined to behave in a given way. At best, he learns how to avoid punishment. So in other words, if a person was punished, that's still, because people have been punished before. People have been punished before, you know, plenty of times, and still go back and, you know, do the same, create the same act, do the same act again, you know. But, you know, so, but B.F. Skinner, these are his views. Let me see what else he has. A failure is not always a mistake. It may simply be the best one can do under the circumstances. The real mistake is to stop trying. So a failure is not always a mistake, right? It may simply be the best one can do under the circumstances. Yeah, right, that's true. A failure is not always a mistake. It can sometimes just be your best. But sometimes if you fail, you go back to the drawing board and try again. The real mistake is to stop trying. So in other words, he's saying, I guess in this quote, don't let failure stop you. Keep on going and keep on going. You know, we all fail. I failed my first accounting course, and if I had stopped and dropped out of college, no, I didn't. I went back and took that course again. So I failed that accounting. My husband got with me, sat down with me because he was pretty good at, you know, accounting. So he knew those debits and credits and those different accounts and, you know, debit on the left, credit on the right, you know, your T account. So he knew all that. And I failed my first accounting course, and I failed a couple other courses, but I went back and took them over. And I had to pay again. I had to spend, extra funds, but I had to take those courses over in order to graduate. So in other words, a failure is not always a mistake. No, it's not a mistake. It's just get up and try again. So the real mistake is to stop trying. In other words, you fail something, and then it's just like you want to take the bar to be a lawyer, and if you fail, it's not a mistake. It's just that you need to go back and try again. See, the real mistake is to stop trying. So what if you say, well, I failed the bar exam. I'm not going back. I'm not going back and take it again, So it's a lot of things that you may fail at before it's all over. But, we can't never give up. So let me see what else he has. Behavior is determined by its consequences. Yep. Behavior is determined by the consequences. That's B.F. Skinner. Behavior is determined by the consequences. The strengthening of behavior which results from reinforcement is appropriately called conditioning. In operant conditioning, we strengthen an operant in the sense of making a response more probable or, in actual fact, more frequent. In operant conditioning, so he discovered something called operant conditioning, where we strengthen an operant. So we strengthen an act or something that we did, we strengthen it. So in the sense of making a response more probable, or in actual fact more frequent. In other words, you do something, and then you say, hey, well, operant conditioning, it's going to be based on my actions. So if I go ahead and say, for instance, I walk down the street and I go in one direction, but I got lost. So I want to try it again, but I want to go back the same way. But I want to be conditioned to make sure I take the right path so I won't get lost the second time. So I'm conditioning myself to have that in my mind, that certain pathway or route that I want to take. So it says the strengthening of behavior, which results from reinforcement, is appropriately called conditioning. In operant conditioning, we strengthen an operant in the sense of making a response more probable. So it's going to be more probable that I'm going to take the right route the next time. So operant conditioning. So that's my definition of it. The major difference between rats and people is that rats learn from experience. So people learn from experience too. I will assume the major difference between rats and people is that rats learn from experience. You talk about a rat. A rat could be a person that always talking about people or ratting on people. But I guess I assume he's talking about real rats. But it says differences, people and rats. The major difference between rats and people is that rats learn from experience. So I think we all can learn from experience. And another thing, B.F. Skinner, give a child an ill shape. Give a child and it'll shape him into anything. Give a child. Well, I guess give a child the experience, give a child the talk, give a child tools. Give a child tools that he or she can learn from, and that could shape him into anything. So in other words, like I say, going to college, give a child, basically in the childlike state, give them some paper and give them some crayons and give them put the ABCs on the paper, their numbers, their 1, 2, 3s, whatever you want to put on the paper for them to learn. Basically, I guess that's what he's saying. So in other words, that's just like with anybody, it don't have to be a child. So give a child, give an adult, give anybody, give a person, give a human, and give them the tools to learn from. We can shape them into anything. So I can definitely believe that B.F. Skinner. So he was a behaviorist. He dealt with operant conditioning. Behavior is shaped and maintained by its consequences. So behavior is shaped and maintained by its consequences. So in other words, your actions will be based on your consequences most of the time. Well, some people have bad consequences and they still go back and commit those bad acts. So behavior is shaped and maintained by the consequences. So in other words, like I was saying about the governors, presidents, and mayors. So when it's time for them to be elected into office, a lot of times people want to look at the things that they have done, or the things that they think they might do once they get in office. Are they going to change the laws? They're going to make these people that do these bad acts, commit these bad acts, suffer the consequences, like a lot of unlaws. They've been trying for years to change those unlaws, but I guess they have changed some, but there's still a lot going on. So behavior is shaped and maintained by the consequences. So basically, B.F. Skinner is saying that, if you implement these behaviors, then you have to suffer the consequences. Simple as that. Consequences. Education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten. Education is what survives. So education can live on forever. So I feel very strong. I don't feel, but my teacher always said, don't say feel. Just say what you mean. Never say I feel. So education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten. So education, I definitely agree with that, and because I am still talking about a lot of stuff that I learned when I was in college, straight university. A lot of these gentlemen I learned about, my accounting, my law classes that I took. I still have a lot of that in my memory after all those years. So I can definitely agree with that. Education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten. Your education is going to still live on. So your education is always going to live on. So sometimes people may say, well, if you don't use your knowledge, you're going to lose it. I don't really believe that, That's not something that I believe. I say, to me, once you go to college, that all those things that you learn will be etched in your mind. You can always review, go through your books, you can always review, but a lot of times that the education will not be lost. In other words, you might forget some things, but I don't think that you're going to forget everything, because you can always, once you look at a word, or you look at something that you learned in college, you might end up, in other words, if you went to college and then 3 or 4 years later, and you learn some terms in college, but 3 or 4 years later, and you can just look at it, and sometimes it would bring back memories. So in other words, when I look at these terms and these different philosophers and musicians like Ludwig, Beethoven, I still remember them when I studied them in college some years ago. Beethoven, Mozart, Plato, Socrates, all those gentlemen that I learned about in college, they're still in my head, still in my memory. I can still remember B.F. Skinner. I learned about him. Pavlov, a whole lot of them. John Locke, Socrates, and his when he dropped the fatal hemlock, and they said he didn't have to drink it, but he died. Anyway, he drunk it and died. I want to talk about later too. I think I talked about slavery, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, the slave, the abolitionists. It's just a whole lot that, we talked all about that in college. Yep. And in high school. And let me read a couple more of his quotes. We are only just beginning to understand the power of love, because we are just beginning to understand the weakness of force and aggression. So we are just beginning to understand the weakness of force and aggression. That's all teaching is, arranging contingencies which bring changes in behavior. So that's all teaching is, arranging contingencies which bring changes in behavior. So if you teach somebody something, there's a chance that their behavior can change. Because sometimes, in my opinion, people only do things because they might not know no better. But when you teach them, hey, you know what, I can teach you a better way. You teach them a better way, sometimes they can bring changes in behavior. As Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. So when you know better, you do better. The consequences of an act affect the probability of its occurring again. The consequences of an act. That's what B.F. Skinner. This is another quote. So I think I read this quote before though. So I think that's it for B.F. Skinner. Let's go to Freud. Let's go to Freud. So the B.F. Skinner, if you want to read a little bit more about B.F. Skinner and Ivan Pavlov. As a matter of fact, let me go to Pavlov. Let me go to Pavlov. And let me go to Pavlov, then I go to Freud and John Locke. And let me go to Ivan Pavlov. I think him and B.F. Skinner had similar views, I would say. I-V-A-N. So let me look at Ivan Pavlov. Okay, he was a Russian physiologist. Russian physiologist. So Ivan Pavlov, he was a Russian physiologist, theory, conditioning, dog, and facts. So he must have dealt with conditioning too. Ivan Pavlov developed an experiment testing the concept of the conditioned reflex. He trained a hungry dog to salivate at the sound of a metronome or buzzer, which was previously associated with the sight of food. So let me read, let me see. Pavlov, Life Research, Classical Conditioning. So he dealing with classical conditioning. B.F. Skinner dealt with operant conditioning. So biography of Ivan Pavlov, father of classical conditioning. Let me show you what he looked like. So he looks kind of old in this picture. So he's dealing with classical conditioning. He dealt with classical conditioning. Ivan Pavlov, classical conditioning, and B.F. Skinner dealt with operant conditioning. Operant conditioning, where you will have a consequence. You will have to deal with certain consequences based on your behavior. So this is Ivan Pavlov. Ivan Petrovich Pavlov, September 14th, 1849 to, he was born 1849 and he died in 1936. He was a Nobel Prize winning physiologist, best known for his classical conditioning. So he dealt with the classical conditioning. So Pavlov, he dealt with the classical conditioning, and B.F. Skinner dealt with the operant conditioning. So he dealt with the classical conditioning. He experimented with dogs. So this is Ivan Pavlov. In his research, he discovered the conditioned reflex, which shaped the field of behaviorism in psychology. So both of them dealt with the behaviorism. So the facts about Pavlov: his occupation, he was a physiologist. He was known for research on conditioned reflexes. Pavlov's dogs. He was born September 14, 1849 in Ryazan, Russia. Died in 1936, February 27, 1936, in Leningrad, Russia. His parents were Peter Pavlov and Varvara. Her name was Ivanovna Uspinskaya. So that's Russian name, I guess. And education, MD, Imperial Medical Academy in St. Petersburg, Russia. Key accomplishments, Ivan Pavlov was a Nobel Prize for physiology in 1904. Imagine that, 1904, some years ago. Offbeat fact, a lunar crater on the moon was named after Pavlov. So a crater on the moon was named after Pavlov. Pavlov was born September 14, 1849 in the small village of Ryazan, Russia. His father, Peter Dmitrievich Pavlov, was a priest who hoped that his son would follow in his footsteps and join the church. So his father hoped that he would follow in his footsteps and join the church. In Ivan's early years, it seemed that his father's dream would become a reality. Ivan was educated in a church school and a theological seminary. But when he read the works of scientists like Charles Darwin and the Theory of Evolution, Charles Darwin, I.M. Sechenov, Ivan decided to pursue scientific studies instead. So let me write this man's name down. I.M. Sechenov. So he was fascinated with Charles Darwin and Charles Darwin, his theory of evolution. Only the fittest survive. So he dealt with doing research based on research based on different species. If they were not fitted to survive in society, they would die off. Only the fittest survive. So I'll read a little bit more about Charles Darwin as well. He left the seminary and began studying chemistry and physiology at the University of St. Petersburg, 1875. He earned an MD from the Imperial Medical Academy before going on to study under Rudolf Heidenhain and Carl Ludwig, two renowned physiologists. So he went on and got his medical degree. He studied chemistry and physiology at the University of St. Petersburg, and he earned his MD, medical doctor, from the Imperial Medical Academy before going on to study under Rudolf Heidenhain and Carl Ludwig. Ivan Pavlov married Serafima Vasilyevna Karchevskaya in 1881. Together they had 5 children. So Pavlov had 5 children, got married, got his medical degree, and he studied classical conditioning, and B.F. Skinner studied operant conditioning. Pavlov and his wife lived in poverty. During the hard times, they stayed with friends, and at one point rented a bug-infested attic space. They tell everything. They will make sure they let you know everything. Pavlov and his wife lived in poverty. During the hard times, they stayed with friends, and at one point rented a bug-infested attic space. So this goes to show you that living in poverty is, I've heard a lot of people say that they, they started out poor. Even Oprah said she started poor. Tyler Perry said he lived in his car. A lot of people started out like that, but, that doesn't have to stop a person from, going on to college if they can, and achieving their goals. So achieving their goals. Pavlov's fortune changed in 1890 when he took an appointment as a professor of pharmacology at the Military Medical Academy. See how your life can change just by that one opportunity. Your life can change. You can start, things can start looking up. You can start making more money. Sometimes certain people come into your life, they can be a help, but sometimes you have to get over those hurdles yourself. That same year, he became the director of the Department of Physiology at the Institute of Experimental Medicine. With these well-funded academic positions, Pavlov had the opportunity to further pursue the scientific studies that interested him. Pavlov's early research focused primarily on the physiology of digestion. He used surgical methods because he was a medical doctor. He went to school, got his medical degree, even though he lived in poverty for a little bit, him and his wife and 5 children. He went on and got his medical degree, and so, he kept on going by exposing portions of a dog's intestinal canal, canal, I guess it's canal, exposing portions of a dog's intestinal canal during surgery. He was able to gain an understanding of gastric secretions and the role of the body and mind in a digestive process. Pavlov sometimes operated on live animals. So he had a medical degree. He sometimes operated on live animals, which was an acceptable practice back, wow, that's something else. Back then, he would not occur, but would not occur today due to modern ethical standards. So right, you can't operate on live animals. Let's say he sometimes operated on live animals, which was an accept, but you have to use, right, it can be no live, it could be live animals, but I guess they have to be under anesthesia, because they do have the veterinarian hospitals that sometimes have to do little surgeries on dogs. They said, but sometimes he operated on live animals, which was an acceptable practice back then, but would not occur today due to modern ethical standards. In 1897, he published his findings in a book called Lectures on the Work of the Digestive Glands. His work on the physiology of digestion was also recognized with a Nobel Prize for Physiology in 1904. Some of Pavlov's other honors include an honorary doctorate from Cambridge University, which was awarded in 1912, and the Order of the Legion of Honor, which was given to him in 1915. So, a discovery of conditioned reflexes. Although Pavlov has many notable accomplishments, he is most well known for defining the concept of conditioned reflexes. A conditioned reflex is considered a form of learning that can occur through exposure to stimuli. So, in other words, a conditioned reflex is a form of learning that occurs through exposure to stimuli. So, in other words, something can stimulate. So, if you are exposed to something, it can expose certain stimulus. It can stimulate you. Pavlov studied this phenomenon in the lab through a series of experiments with dogs. Initially, Pavlov was studying the connection between salivation and feeding. He proved that dogs have an unconditioned response when they are fed. In other words, they are hardwired to salivate at the prospect of eating. So I guess he's talking about dogs, if they were, when it was time for them to eat, they were so hungry and eager to eat that they will produce more saliva, I guess. They would produce more saliva when they were most at their most hungriest point. So, however, Pavlov noticed that mere sight of a person in a lab coat was enough to cause the dogs to salivate. So if they saw the doctors in the coat, with their doctors, the white coat, they would be more eager, because I guess it's almost like they were conditioned when they saw them, when they saw those doctors in those white coats. That was already in their mind. They was ready to. They knew they were gonna be fed, and then once they were fed, they can salivate. They would salivate more frequently. So as we say, the dogs had learned that a lab coat meant food. That's what I was saying. I just said that. Yep, they knew that a lab coat meant food. That's just like you implement. I guess in other words, you're doing something bad, you're doing something good. What if you're doing something bad, and then you say, I'm doing, the person did something bad, but they already know that, hey, when they do something bad, that's just like a kid, and he do something bad, or anybody in society do something bad, it's going to be a consequence. It's going to be a consequence. Dogs had learned that a lab coat meant food, so every time they see a lab coat, they knew food was coming. So they were conditioned to, and in their memory, they were conditioned to know that when they see that lab coat, that white lab coat, they knew they were going to be fed. They salivated every time they saw a lab assistant. In other words, the dogs had been conditioned, that's what I said, to respond a certain way. So in other words, we become conditioned in a lot of things that we do. We are conditioned, like I said, you do something bad, you got to suffer consequences. You're going to be conditioned to know that, hey, you did that, that's not right. A kid, hit another kid, you're going to be conditioned to get a whipping. Some parents don't believe in whipping, but, whippings, but, so the dogs had learned that a lab coat meant food, and in response, they salivated every time they saw the lab coat. In other words, the dogs had been conditioned to respond a certain way. From this point on, Pavlov decided to devote himself to the study of conditioning. So he decided to study, devote himself to the study of conditioning. Pavlov tested his theories in the lab using a variety of neural stimuli. For example, he used electric shocks, a buzzer that produced specific tones, and the ticking of a metronome to make the dogs associate certain noises and stimuli with food. So in other words, he put a certain noise, in other words, a certain noise would make them know that, hey, it's time to eat. So it's just like here, and just like in the world, you hear the, we hear the alarm. If like over here where we live, we have a fire alarm. So we have a fire alarm, sometimes it may go off, so we are conditioned in our mind to know that fire alarm is associated to something bad, like a fire, or 9 times out of 10 it's a fire, somebody left something on the stove, or smoke or something. So we are already conditioned in our mind, so when that alarm goes off, and it goes off sometimes. So that's what he's talking about. He's talking about, in other words, dogs, I guess the word I want to use is I guess I could say teach them or show them or make them know that, hey, this put it forward, put it in front of them. In other words, they're learning that particular sound is associated with that food, and it might be another sound that may be associated to, hey, it's time for your dog walk. And maybe, it's time for you to go to the bathroom. So you can do a sound for that too. Why not? So it's a sound. So it's a Pavlov tested the theories in the lab using a variety of neural stimuli. For example, he used electric shocks, a buzzer that produced specific tones. So he made his tones and the thickening of a metronome to make the dogs associate certain noises and stimuli with food. So he was creating those particular tones, those sounds. So once he kept on presenting them, I guess I would say, I guess I would say that he kept on presenting those same sounds. Once they kept hearing those same sounds, they were conditioned to know. They were conditioned to know that that was the time for them to eat. And then when they ate, when the dogs ate, then they would salivate more. So that was Ivan Pavlov. And it says, even though he was not a physiologist, Pavlov suspected that his findings could be applied to humans as well. He believed that a conditioned response may be causing certain behaviors in people with physiological problems, and that these responses could be unlearned. Other scientists, such as John B. Watson, proved this theory correct when they were able to replicate Pavlov's research with humans. So Pavlov, he still was associated with another scientist, John B. Watson. So John B. Watson, he had, he believed in Ivan Pavlov's theory of, having the dogs conditioned to this particular sound. So he created a sound, and the dogs were conditioned to the sound. And when they heard the same sound, this was a sound. This sound made them, they would salivate more, and they would salivate more, and then they knew that this was the time for them to eat. This was the time that, hey, my dog owner is going to feed me when I hear this particular sound. So they know that when they didn't feed them, when Pavlov didn't feed them their food, when he didn't feed them the food, and he didn't, they didn't hear that sound. They didn't hear that particular sound. Pavlov didn't feed them no food. So, but when they heard that sound, then they fed them. They would eat more, and they would salivate more. So that's what he was saying. They were conditioned to that sound. But then they said, and look, he worked in the lab until his death at the age of 86. So let me see if Pavlov have any quotes. Let me see if just a couple of quotes. Let me see if he have any quotes. I think I didn't read no quotes with him yet. Okay, Pavlov, he has some quotes. Let me see. I just want to read it because it's top 25 quotes. Let me see. Never think that you already know all. Never think that you already know all. Don't never think that you already know all. It's always something to learn, because there's so many different colleges. You can't never think that you know all, because you don't. There's so many different majors, especially, and first of all, that's one area. It's so many different majors in colleges and universities that my major was information systems and business administration. So I learned through the required courses that was in my courses that were in my curriculum. I learned from those. But look, there's so many other majors that. Oh, look at all that. There's so much learning. So that's why he said, never think that you already know all. You don't know everything. It's so, first of all, in college and like I said, universities, there's so much in that area. Then you have so much that can be learned in far as life experiences. I mean, that's, colleges and universities, that's like their book knowledge, but we still have a lot that we can learn, that we are still learning. We are still here on earth, so there's still a lot to learn. However highly you are appraised, always have the courage to say to yourself, I am ignorant. So he reminded me of Socrates when he said the unexamined life is not worth living. And then, so if you don't examine your life, then you can't, it's like, I don't, it feel like, he's saying like, hey, you got to examine your life to have a fruitful, beautiful learning experience. So in other words, examine your life. Know where you want to go in the future. You want to run your business. You want to run, You want to run your own corporation. You want to LLC. Whatever you want to do in your life. You want to go to college. You want to get married. You want to have children. You want to teach. You want to be a doctor. You want to be a lawyer. So the unexamined life. So examine your life. Examine your life. Are you ethical? Are you unethical? What are your morals and your values? Do you have a high value system? So examine your life, whatever it may be. So in other words, however highly you are praised, always have the courage to say to yourself, I am ignorant. And like Plato said, the wisest man is a man that knows he knows nothing. So that's Plato. So when you know that you don't know nothing, he said right here, however highly you are praised, always have the courage to say to yourself, I am ignorant. You might not be stupid, but you might be ignorant to certain facts. You could be ignorant to certain information that you just don't have. That's what that means. In other words, you studying in college, you studying one major. You might be ignorant to another major because you didn't go to college for that. You went to college for, or your university for that particular major. So you might be ignorant in another person's major. In other words, I did take some law classes, business, accounting. So I would not be ignorant in those classes. But if you put some other classes in front of me, then I'll be ignorant to those. So that's what that is. It doesn't mean that you're dumb and stupid. It just means that you are ignorant to certain other subjects that you don't know about. Because if nothing is put before you and you didn't learn nothing about it in front of you, if it's not put in front of you and you didn't learn about it, so then you're gonna be ignorant to the facts or to that information. You'll be ignorant to that. So that's what that means. So let me see. It says Ivan Pavlov, another quote: "Don't become a mere recorder of facts, but try to penetrate the mystery of their origin." So don't become a mere recorder of facts. So don't be just, I guess it means that don't just record the facts, but try to penetrate the mystery of their origin. So try to find out where the facts came from, where the origin, the root, find out where they came from. So don't just become a mere recorder. Don't just write down, you learn something, find out where it came from, find out why that particular information was made public, or was, it don't have to be made public, but was introduced to you. In other words, you learn certain information, and then you learn that information, and you just writing down the facts from whatever you learn. But so what he's saying is, try to penetrate the mystery of the origin. Try to penetrate the mystery. Try to go deeper. Like my teacher, he always would get deep down in the chapter, because he would always say, you know what, most of my courses down Strayer University, at the time I was there, we always had open book tests. So just because we had open book tests, that didn't mean that you didn't have to study. So a lot of my students, a lot of my classmates, I would say, they was like, I'm not going to study because the test's going to be open book. I said, yeah, well, I just kept quiet because I already knew that they telling me they weren't going to study. So I don't know if they were trying to trick me to make me think that they weren't going to study because it was open book. I said, yeah, well, those open book tests, my teacher would get Professor Bush, Strayer University. I had Professor Bush down Strayer University, and I had Dr. Jewell, Strayer University. And they had, when we had our open book test, and you think you're going, you still had to study because you want it in your memory. You want it in your memory. You don't want to just not study and then you go and you got to try to find it in the book. No, you want to study. It's in your memory. So when the questions come up on the test, you say, oh, I remember this. I memorized it. I studied it. So that's what he's saying. Penetrate the mystery of the origin. Get down in the book. Read it. Read it 4 or 5 times if you have to. So that's what I had to do last time. When I took accounting, and all the other courses that I did take, my law class, I did pretty good in my law class. So we had to go in the class we had to go in front of the class and do presentations, and No, we had to get down into the chapter. You know, we had to explain. We might have to explain a term like entrapment. You know, different terms we might have to explain. You know, but we had to go in front of the class. But we had to read and study and get down into the book. You know, don't just. In other words, he said, don't become a mere recorder of facts, but try to penetrate the mystery of their origin. So another one, men are apt to be much more influenced by words than by the actual facts of the surrounding reality. And it says that when a dog is repeatedly teased with the sight of objects inducing salivary secretion from a distance, the reaction of the salivary glands grows weaker and weaker and finally drops to zero. When a dog is repeatedly teased with the sight of objects inducing salivary secretion from a distance, the reaction of salivary glands grows weaker and weaker and finally drops to zero. While you are experimenting, do not remain content with the surface of things. Science demands from a man of all his life. If you had 2 lives, that would not be enough for you. Be passionate in your work and in your searching. Science demands from a man all his life. So science demands from a man all his life. If you had 2 lives, that would not be enough for you. That's true. So we had 2 lives. It said learn, compare, collect the facts. Ivan Pavlov. So perfect as the wing of a bird may be, it would never enable the bird to fly. So perfect as the wing of a bird may be, it will never enable the bird to fly. Ivan Pavlov. It says mankind will possess incalculable advantages and extraordinary control over human behavior when the scientific investigator will be able to subject his fellow men to the same external analysis he would employ for any natural object, and when the human mind will contemplate itself not from within but from without. It is still open to question whether psychology is a natural science or whether it can be regarded as a science at all. Okay, so let me go ahead to Sigmund Freud and his id, ego, and superego, and he deals with the self-conscious mind. So in other words, our dreams, he felt surface to our unconscious. Let me see, let me go with Sigmund. Sigmund Freud. I should have my drink right here. Okay, nose itching. Okay, Sigmund Freud. Theories, books, biography. Sigmund Freud. He was born May 6, 1856. Freiburg, Moravia, Austrian Empire. He died September 23rd, 1939 in London, England. Austrian neurologist and the founder of psychoanalysis. He was the father of psychoanalysis. Okay, Freud may justly be called the most influential. So in other words, it's justified that he was called the most influential intellectual legislator of his age. His creation of psychoanalysis was at once a theory of the human psyche, the human mind, a therapy for the relief of its ills, and an optic for the interpretation of culture and society. Despite repeated criticisms, attempted refutations, and qualifications of Freud's work, its spell remained powerful well after his death, and in fields far removed from psychology as is narrowly defined. Every time I get to reading, my nose gets a little stopped. If, as the American sociologist Philip Rieff once contended, psychological man replaced such earlier notions as political, religious, or economic man as the 20th century's dominant self-image. It is in no small measure due to the power of Freud's vision and the seeming inexhaustibility of the intellectual legacy he left behind. So Freud left an intellectual legacy behind. So a lot of times, a lot of these people in our past, these philosophers and musicians, like the great Beethoven, Ludwig van Beethoven, we have Mozart, all those musical geniuses and philosophers. And then we also have painters. I'll be talking about some of those. So like I said, it's going to be a while because there's so many. I want to talk about the painters. We also have Picasso, Rembrandt, Michelangelo. There's so many different ones. Freud's father, this is the early life and training of Sigmund Freud. Freud's father, Jacob, was a Jewish wool merchant who had been married once before he wed the boy's mother. Amalie Nathanson, the father, 40 years old at Freud's birth, seems to have been a relatively remote and authoritarian figure, while his mother appears to have been more nurturing, emotionally available. Although Freud had two older half-brothers, his strongest, if also most ambivalent attachment seems to have been to a nephew John, 1 year his senior, who provided the model of intimate friend and hated rival that Freud reproduced often at later stages of his life. In 1859, the Freud family was compelled for economic reasons to move to Leipzig and then a year after Vienna, where Freud remained until the Nazi annexation of Austria 78 years later. Despite Freud's dislike of the imperial city, in part because of its citizens' frequent anti-Semitism, psychoanalysis reflected in significant ways the cultural and political context out of which it emerged. For example, Freud's sensitivity to the vulnerability of paternal authority within the mind may well have been stimulated by the decline in power suffered by his father's generation. Often liberal rationalists in the Habsburg Empire, so too his interest in the theme of the seduction of daughters was rooted in complicated ways in the context of Viennese attitudes towards family. Freud graduated from the Sperl Gymnasium and apparently inspired by a public reading of an essay of Goethe. I think I heard, let me write that down too. Goethe. I can talk about him maybe next. Freud was graduated from the Sperl Gymnasium and apparently inspired by a public reading of an essay of Goethe on nature turned to medicine as a career. So Freud he was inspired by Goethe on nature. He turned to medicine as a career. At the University of Vienna, he worked with one of the leading physiologists of his day, Ernest von Bruck, an exponent of the materialist and anti-vitalist science of Hermann von Helmholtz. In 1882, he entered the General Hospital in Vienna as a clinical assistant to train a psychiatrist Theodore Maynard and a professor of internal medicine. In 1885, Freud was appointed lecturer in neuropathology, having concluded important research on the brain's medulla. At this time, he also developed an interest in the pharmaceutical benefits of AIM, which he pursued for several years, although some beneficial results were found in eye surgery, which had been credited to Freud's friend, Carl Kahler. The general outcome was horrible. Not only did Freud's advocacy lead to a mortal addiction in another close friend. Okay, let's see. Freud's scientific training remained for cardinal importance in his work, or at least in his own conception. Okay, let's see what Freud was mostly known for. Let's see. Okay, several months after his return, he married. So in other words, he got married. Daughters of a prominent Jewish family whose ancestors included a chief rabbi of Hamburg and Heinrich Heine. She was to bear 6 children, one of whom, Anna Freud, was to become a distinguished psychoanalyst in her own right. So his wife, he got married. She became a psychoanalyst in her own right. Okay, let me see what else Freud is. Okay, psychoanalytic theory of Sigmund Freud. So in other words, his wife was a psychoanalyst as well as he was, Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, so I want to show a picture of Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud. That's Sigmund Freud right there. So Sigmund Freud, and so Sigmund Freud. So Sigmund Freud, so I'm gonna have to probably get ready to cut this video short. Let's see, Sigmund Freud. So Freud, still beholden to Charcot's hypnotic method, did not grasp the full implications of Brewer's experience until a decade later when he developed the technique free association. So let's see what else. Freud's work on hysteria had focused on female and its potential for neurotic expression to be fully universal. Psychoanalyst, a term Freud coined in 1896, would also have to examine the male psyche in a condition of what might be called normality. It would have to become more than a psychotherapy and develop into a complete theory of the mind. To this end, Freud accepted enormous risks of generalizing from the experience he knew best, his own. Okay, let's see. Okay, Freud's, like I said, Freud dealt with interpretations of dreams. He dealt with the id. In other words, he felt that we had 3 different personalities. We had the id, the ego, and the superego. It says, in what many commentators consider his masterwork, Diatrom du Tong, published in 1899, but given the date of the joint century to emphasize its epochal character. More precisely, okay, Freud dealt with dreams. So in other words, he felt dreams were often suppressed to our self-conscious mind. More precisely, dreams are the disguised expression of wish fulfillment. Like neurotic symptoms, they are the effects of compromises in the psyche, in your mind, between desires and prohibitions in conflict with their realization. Although sleep can relax the power of the mind's diurnal censorship or of forbidden desires, such censorship nonetheless persists in part during nocturnal existence. So in other words, he felt that dreams therefore have to be decoded to be understood, and not merely because they are actually forbidden desires experienced in distorted fashion, for dreams undergo further revision in the process of being recounted to the animus. So a lot of times when you dream, I know when I dream, sometimes dreams may seem real. But let me finish up on Freud, and I'm going to close this video. The interpretation of dreams. So Freud dealt with the dreams. You know, dreams are surface to the subconscious mind, your psyche. He dealt with the id. In other words, we had a side of us that was the id, the ego, the superego. So it says the interpretation of dreams provides a hermeneutic for the unmasking of the dreams disguise or dream works as Freud called it. The first of these activities, condensation, operates through the fusion of several different elements into one. As such, it exemplifies one of the key operations of psychic life. Psychic life, that's your mind, which Freud called overdetermination. No direct correspondence between a simple manifest content and its multidimensional latent counterpart can be assumed. The second activity of the dream work, displacement, refers to the decentering of dream thoughts. So a lot of times when I dream, I mean, it be so real. It seems like it's so real. I mean, it just seems so real. I'm like, then I wake up, I'm like, wow, that was a dream? That seems like, I thought I was in the dream. I mean, that's no joke. Decoding the dream thus means translating such visual representations back into subjectively available language through free association. Sometimes they say you can decode your dream. So a lot of times what you dream, if you can decode it, sometimes they tell you that it means something. It means something that happened in your life, or it means, but yeah, they said sometimes, and then a lot of times when people dream certain things, they make one play some numbers or something. They say, I dreamt this, and then because they do have these dream books that you can look in and you can check on your dreams. So sometimes they say your dreams do mean, sometimes your dreams do have important meanings. But it says in 1904, Freud published Der Psychopathologie des Alltagslebens. That's the psychopathology of everyday life. So that's the way it is. I guess that's the way he wrote it, but they gave us the, a different spelling because that looked like it's in Spanish. Part of it looked like it's in Spanish because it said Des Alltagslebens, but the name of it is the psychopathology of everyday life. So that's what he published in 1904. So that's Sigmund Freud, dealing with the psyche, dealing with the dreams, dealing with your mind. So I do believe that your mind, your dreams have a lot to do with your mind. In other words, you can have something on your mind that you experience during the day while you're up, but then when you go to bed, and you can, next thing you know, it can be suppressed in your dreams. I had such and such happen to me today, this is an example. I had this happen, but when I went to bed, and then, this seemed like it almost happened all over again. And let me see what else it said. In 1905, Freud extended the scope of this analysis by examining Derwitt's unseen jokes and their relation of the unconscious, invoking the idea of joke work as a process comparable to dream work. So joke work, dream work. He also acknowledged the double-sided quality of jokes, at once consciously contrived and unconsciously revealing seemingly innocent phenomena like puns or jests, are as open to interpretation as more obviously tendentious, obscene or hostile jokes. In 1905, he published a work that first thrust him into the limelight as an alleged champion of understanding of the mind. So Freud has so many works, so you can read more on Sigmund Freud and his dream analysis. It's so much here, and he goes into a whole lot of stuff that I don't want to talk about online. Okay, I think that's it for Freud. Let me see who else we have. I did Beethoven, Mozart, B.F. Skinner, Freud, Pavlov. Let's go to Goethe. Let's do a couple more. I don't know how long YouTube will let me have this video, but let me go with Goethe. Goethe. Let's see what his contributions. I like to, study these. I like to go back over these. I like to go back over these, these gentlemen of our past, whether it's female or male, because I am interested, because I think they have some, their contributions to our history is very enlightening, rewarding. We don't just want to you don't want to just learn about slavery, because I figure slavery that was something I probably go over that too, but I like to learn all I can learn about everything. Because a lot of times when you go to college, and even in real life, you don't learn everything in college, and you're not gonna learn everything. You're not gonna learn everything just street life, book life. You're not gonna learn. So in other words, people can help you, people can teach you. You can do research. There's so many different ways to learn. Like Henry David Thoreau, he went down to the pond he wanted to build a house down there not too far from where he was living, went down there by the pond. He took his axe and he said he wanted to be one with nature. He wanted to go down there and suck the marrow out of life. He wanted to back life into a corner. He wanted to go down there and see what he could not learn, what the environment that he was around had to teach. So there was Henry David Thoreau. So I think I did some information on him in one of my other videos, but I can talk about him again too. So we have Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but but just want to see. I should just read some quotes. Let me see. Okay, he was Wolfgang von Goethe. He was a German poet and playwright. German poet, playwright. German poet, playwright. So when I finish everybody, I'm gonna have a large. I probably have a whole book. I might as well write a book. Once I get everybody together, put it in a book. Because this book right here, I have to. This is my book right here, and so I'm finished, but I just have to type it up and put my pictures in. But I mean, doing all this research and these different people here, I was thinking about writing a book and putting all the philosophers in the book, all the musicians, all the painters, put it all in one book. And I'll think about that, so I might do that. So Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, he was a German poet, playwright, novelist, scientist, statesman, theater director, critic, and amateur artist, considered the greatest German literary figure of the modern era. Goethe is the only German literary figure whose range and international standing equal those of Germany's supreme philosophers and composers, who have often set his works to music. In the literary culture of the German-speaking countries, he has had a dominant position that, since the end of the 18th century, his writings have been described as classical. In a European perspective, he appears as a central and unsurpassed representative of the Romantic movement, broadly understood. So I'm not going to read all this. He was one of the very few figures of Germany's 18th century literary renaissance who were, in the full sense of the term, burghers. Unlike most of his contemporaries, he had no need, at least in the first half of his life, to seek princely patronage of his writing or employment as an official or an academic. Let me see what's most important. He was educated with his sister at home by tutors until he was 16. His father had very definite ideas about his education and intended that Goethe should follow the pattern he himself had pursued as a young man studying law, gaining experience at the Rechtskammergericht, the Supreme Court of the Holy Roman Empire. So he left home in 1765. He left home to study law in Leipzig, the university there. had been the center of Germany's literary revival over the previous 40 years in the Drawing Academy run by Adam Frederick Oser, friend and teacher of the art historian Johann Wickelmann, then living in Rome. Goethe indirectly became one of the Wickelmann's disciples. He had an almost finished form of a biblical play and a moralistic novel when he entered the university, but after reading them to his friends, he ostentatiously burned them as unworthy of his now advanced taste and started to write erotic verse and a pastoral drama. So in other words, he was writing this work, this novel, but he didn't, he was writing this novel that he wrote, but I guess after he finished it, he read it, he really didn't like it, so they say he burned it, and then he started writing some other stuff It says he studied at Strasbourg for the doctorate. However, he had now emerged from his Christian period, and for his dissertation, he chose a potentially shocking subject from ecclesiastical law concerning the nature of ancient Jewish religion. So I'm trying to see, Frankfurt Goethe. He started a legal practice, but found the new literary possibilities to which Herder had opened his mind, running away with him. His uneasy conscience over Frederick, combined with the inspiration provided by the memoirs of the 16th century robber baron Gosbon Berlingen, furnished him with the material of a play in a manner Shakespearean. Shakespeare is one too. And Germanic, which he thought Herder would approve. So just some stuff about him. It says law took up his time. In other words, he was a lawyer. Law took up his time in 1773, but most of it went on literary work. The dramatic fragment, Prometheus, dates from this period and on, preparing for the private publication of a revised version of Gotts in the Summer. So he wrote had a lot of writings. So he also wrote some poems. The years from 1773 to 76 were the most productive period in Goethe's life. Poems and other works, mainly fragments, poured out, so he did poems. A lot of poems he wrote in different years. So I think that's, there's so much on here about him, but let me see if he have any quotes. So he was a German poet and playwright, Wolfgang von Goethe. So let me see if he got any quotes on here. Right, he was a German poet, playwright, novelist, he was everything. Went to school to become a scientist. He was a statesman, theater director, critic, amateur artist. He was considered the greatest German literary figure of the modern era. German literary figure of the modern era. Let me see if you have any quotes, and I think I'm going to close out on this note here. Let me see, because I am going into 2 hours on this video. I think that was let me see, I think some of these other ones I'll go over next time. Let me see if we have some of his quotes. Let me see if 9 times out of 10 they all have quotes, but I think I'm gonna end it on this note. John Wolfgang von Goethe, knowing is not enough. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do. So knowing is not enough. We must apply it to our real life. In other words, that's what he's saying. Willing is not enough. We must do. So willing is not enough. And I guess, to me, that comes under getting that experience. So you know it. When you know it, you know about something. That's just like a doctor going to school, a medical doctor going to school to be, a medical doctor. Then once you know it, you apply it. You waiting on patients. You working at a job, or you have your own practice. Same thing with lawyers. You learn the law, then you go implement the law in the law firm, or wherever you work as wherever you work once you finish your degree. And even business, whatever your major is, whatever you study, whatever you learn. It don't have to be college. It could be whatever type of learning experience that you acquired, and where you acquired it from. It doesn't have to be college. It could be somebody can teach you something. You learn from your parents. We always learn from somebody. We can learn from a friend, our parents, our cousins, our friends. But knowing is not enough. We must apply. We must apply what we learned. So willing is not enough. We must do. So in other words, don't be willing to do something. You know something about something. You know this. You learn this. You learn that. Willing is not enough. We must do. So don't just be willing to do it. Do it. If you can help somebody, help them. Or you feel like you want to go to college. Don't just be willing to go to college. Go ahead and do it. Whatever you want, whatever you thinking about in your mind, like Freud said, your psyche, your mind, whatever you're thinking about, do it. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. If I love you, what business is it of yours? Now that one right there, if I love you, what business is it of yours? In other words, if I love you, I guess that's really none of your business. I guess it could be your business, but really, if you love somebody, that's on you, because you have to iron out your own feelings. Because you can be in love with somebody, and they may not love you. That's for you to work out. Because in other words, he said, if I love you, what business is it of yours? I love you. Because you can be in love with somebody, they can break your heart, and it's going to be on you to get over it. You're going to have to be the one to get over it, because they're not going to be worried, because they're going about their business. They're going to find somebody else. I love you, I love you, but, I can love you, but you might not love me. And that's for me. I'm going to have to deal with that. That's the heartbreak is going to be on me if you break my heart. I love you. What business is it of yours? A person hears only what they understand. That's true. A person hears only what they understand. Let me read a couple more quotes. I think I'm going to close this video out because it's been... And this is Johann Wolfgang van Goethe. Quotes. One ought every day at least to hear a little song, read a good poem, see a fine picture, and if it were possible, to speak a few reasonable words. So let me read one more quote. As soon as you trust yourself, you will know how to live. As soon as you trust yourself, you'll know how to live. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and Faust. They said Faust first part. So I think I'm going to, one more, and say, this is what I just read. If I love you, what business is it of yours? That's really one that, that's something to think about. If I love you, what business is it of yours? But we don't think like that. In other words, you're going to tell somebody you love them, and what if you say, well, I love you, but what business is it of yours? And they're going to be like, yeah, it's my business. It is my business. But in other words, it's on you. If you love somebody, the feeling is coming from within you. Really, that's how, if you really want to look at it, you're in love with somebody, the feelings is coming from within you. But if they love you, that's on a part of them. It's coming from within them. You can't control their feelings, and they can't control yours. So that's what I think he's trying to say. If you've never eaten while crying, you don't know what life tastes like. So these are some nice quotes to think about. If you've never eaten while crying, you don't even know what life tastes like. Never eaten. I mean, I've been eating and crying at the same time, so I definitely know what life tastes like. So Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Let me do one more. Let me see, John Locke. I had said I was gonna close up, but let me just read some quotes of John Locke. I'm not gonna go into, and then I think I'm gonna close this video out until I get ready to do another video. Let me see, quotes. I know John Locke was talking about the social contract with people and the government. Then I want to get into Thomas Jefferson and all those signers of the Declaration of Independence, where they went through a whole lot. Some of them were killed. Some of the family was killed. Some of the family were killed. And I want to get into some of that because that was considered, I didn't know that until I read it, sometimes you got to read more into stuff. It was an act, the British, the government, considered that as an act of treason, and some of them, they had to go through a whole lot to sign the Declaration of Independence. John Locke, a British philosopher. He was a British philosopher. John Locke, a British philosopher. I have always thought the actions of men the best interpreters of their thoughts. No man's knowledge here can go beyond his experience. Every man has a property in his own person. Every man has a property in his own person. So your person is your body, your body. Just nobody has a right to but himself. Let me see, 25. I'm going to end on this note. Let me see what John Locke. Just a couple of quotes. I'll read a little bit more on John Locke. John Locke. All men by nature are equal in that equal right that every man hath to his natural freedom, without being subjected to the will of or authority of any other man, being all equal and independent. No one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. All men by nature are equal in that equal right that every man hath to his natural freedom. So every man is entitled to his natural freedom without being subjected to the will or authority of any other man. So in other words, every man is entitled to their natural freedom without being harassed and hurt by another man. Being all equal and independent. Yep, do what they want to do without, in other words, they have the right to be equal and independent without some harassment of another man. But we know that's not, nowadays, if this was, if they would read this quote here and think about it, and, sometimes you just have to think about things before you act. No one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. So in other words, no man should harm another man. The next man should be free to do what he want to do without worrying about another man harming him in his life, messing up his health, and jeopardizing his liberty, his freedoms, and his possessions. See, so all men by nature are equal in that equal right that every man hath to his natural freedom. So every man is entitled to his natural freedom. Every woman too. Everybody. We are all entitled to our natural freedoms. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So on that note, John Locke, I'll probably do a little bit more on John Locke next time, but I'm going to close out on this video, and I want to say thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for being here. Glad you could make it. So if you can please hit that subscribe button, and I'm going to bring you very interesting, enlightening, educational information on my channel. So I want to get out in the field, eventually do a little blogging, but I'm trying to, do some more research and find out, what are some of my next steps going to be. For right now, for the most part, I'm just going to be doing my little research and, you know, bringing you information on different, you know, business, you know, different business, you know, I guess I said different business information, I guess. You know, marketing, advertising, you know, marketing, getting those products out there to the customer, branding, trademarking, you know, you have your logos, your labels, you know, you're creating your trademark, you're creating your brand. You're setting yourself aside from the next brand, from the next company. But so I want to say thanks for joining me, and I'm going to end on this note because I know this video probably is probably about 2 hours, so I know I might have to end up cutting it short. But I want you all to have a blessed day. Today is Friday, so have a blessed day, and I'll probably see you on my next video. So have a blessed one, and thanks for joining me. Bye.